Hello! Today I'm here to wrap up the second half of my August reading. I haven't read as much this half of the month, but I've been kind of okay with that. I'm only 3 away from my overall yearly goal of reading 100 now. So I think my wrap-ups from now on might not be quite as much as they are usually, purely because I feel okay about taking it a bit easier, and I like that because it means that I'm able to pick up books that are a bit longer or that I'm taking more time over, and I'm quite enjoying that. So I'll get straight into it with a book that is perfect testament to the fact that I'm able to take a bit longer over kind of perhaps more dense and longer books. It was 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel, Garcia, Marquez. I've wanted to read this for a long time because I think Gabriel Garcia Marquez is kind of a founder, I suppose, of magical realism. I think he's definitely somebody that you kind of need to explore if you want to understand the genre. On the surface, this perhaps isn't a book that I would enjoy. It's a family saga, which I don't think I've ever actually read a proper family saga like this before, but it's not something that I would automatically gravitate towards. Also, I'm kind of skeptical about magical realism in novels. I love magical realism in short stories, and I put a lot of magical realism into my own writing, but when it comes to novels, I don't know, I'm kind of less willing to suspend my belief. Obviously there are exceptions. Angela Carter novels I adore, Amy Bender novels I adore, but I was kind of skeptical about going into something that's this long with magical realism, because I think certainly, and I'm pretty sure it was Jen Campbell who says, putting magical realism into a short story is kind of easier because you don't have to explain everything and you don't have to go into the world, whereas it's kind of harder to pull off in a novel because you kind of have to explain the world. But what I really enjoyed about this was that the magical realism was quite subtle. So before I say anything else, let's talk about what this is about. So as I say, it's a family saga. It follows the Buendia family. I don't know, I've probably said that wrong. It's originally Spanish, this novel. It follows the Buendia family. It starts off when we're following Jose Arcadio Buendia and his wife Ursula, and they basically found a town, and let me remember what the town is called. They found a town called Macondo, effectively, and it's kind of a magical place. It's like this world out of the world, and we then just follow their family and what happens and the generations that follow on, and basically look at the life of this town from its foundation to its destruction, effectively. As I say, this is magical realism. The magical realism elements are really subtle, and it's things like the town of Macondo itself is kind of, it's not quite in this world, it's kind of magical, it's not quite how things usually are. Also, there are things such as the fact that Ursula, for instance, is this constant presence in this book. So to outlive a lot of people, like her grandchildren are dying before her. I have a feeling that she lives for around 100 years. It never specifically says, but it definitely hints at the fact that she's been alive for longer than you would expect. There's also a figure in here who, she's not related to the family, but she does have ties with the family. She's had children with a few of the men in the family, and she ends up living, I think they say, till over 200 years. So there are small things like that which just, they're in there, but they're not like massive slap you in the face, this is magical realism. They're just kind of subtly intertwined into the narrative. And also things like one of the characters basically goes to fight in like multiple wars and lives over, you know, generations and generations, and obviously that's not right again in terms of his lifespan, and it doesn't quite work out. Also, there are more obvious things like one of the characters, when she dies, she levitates and things like that, which, yeah, I didn't, that was the one thing that kind of jarred for me. I kind of, it was a very obvious magical thing in this kind of otherwise subtle world, so that kind of jarred for me, but otherwise I adored this book. It was 5 stars for me. I can't wait to reread it, and I'm really glad that I gave it a go. The only thing I would say about this is that you do need to keep your wits about you, and you do need to concentrate, for the main reason that this is a family saga where the men in the family, and also the women, but not the women as much, there are less women I suppose, but the men in the family all have sort of similar names. There is Arcadio and then there is Aureliano, and it gets quite confusing when you've got a generational book like this and every generation has the same name. There are things in there that distinguish them, so like one Aureliano will have his surname, or Arcadio will have Jose before his name, so there is stuff in every generation to distinguish them. And there's also a very useful little guide here that shows you who's who and whose children are who. I would only say if you stopped paying attention or were kind of reading this while you were kind of half concentrating, I think it could be very easy to get lost in this. I certainly found while I was reading it and while I was reading a big chunk, it was easy to keep up with who was who, but as soon as I put it down and came back to it the next day or whatever, I was quite baffled. But yeah, I would highly recommend this. I think it's fantastic. If you like family sagas, even if you're a bit skeptical about magical realism, give this a go. It is not blatant magical realism, it's very subtle, and so I would honestly recommend this one. Then I have More Than This by Patrick Ness. Now I'm sure if you've been around for a while you will know that I am an avid YA not liker. I don't like YA as a genre. It infuriates me. However, Patrick Ness and his Chaos Walking trilogy predominantly is one YA series that I really did enjoy, and I think I like Patrick Ness because he doesn't just do the typical coming of age, oh will they won't they, oh heartbreak, oh love triangle, oh and suddenly everything's okay. He does a lot more than that. He looks at things like political issues, he looks at really important issues, issues about the way that society functions and the way that people find their place in that society. So I have a lot more respect and time for him than I do for most YA authors, which is why I gave this one a go. I have to say, this was not a perfect book, but it did impress me and it did get 4 stars, which is impressive for a YA book. So this follows a boy called Seth. At the start we meet him when he is dying and he ends up going into a other world which he's not quite sure if it's heaven, he's not quite sure if it's hell, he's not quite sure if he's even dead. I don't want to say anything more than that because I didn't know anything more than that, and this book, it goes into a lot of philosophical questions about life. It kind of, I think the best thing I can say without spoiling anything is that it ends up being very Matrix-esque, but for a younger audience. It also is fantastic because it has just excellent representation. Seth, for instance, in the life he has, let's say, just left, was a gay boy who was in a relationship with another boy called Goodman, and what I liked about their relationship is that I don't think I've ever read a YA book that just looks at just a gay relationship as just a normal relationship. I think definitely different sexualities are represented in YA fiction more and more, but I don't recall ever reading something where it's just completely normalised and it just shows them in bed just taking pictures and chatting and just being a couple. And it shouldn't be refreshing, but it was really refreshing because there was no big deal made about it. It wasn't like a thing, it was just there and it just happened, and I think that was really lovely, especially in a book for younger people. I would also say that this is good in terms of the fact that one of the main characters who Seth meets in this new world that he ends up in is a black girl and the other one is a Polish boy. I think diversity in books is kind of difficult because these things shouldn't be good things, they should be just standard. But I think these are things that are missing a lot in fiction, and especially young adult fiction. I think it's important to put these kind of things in there, and yeah, I enjoyed that aspect of it. The only thing I would say about this is that the beginning is quite telly. It's kind of awkward because obviously Seth wakes up and he's on his own, so there's nobody who can sort of tell us things, but like there's a moment where he sort of speaks out loud to himself, my name is Seth, I'm Seth, and it just kind of, it really clunks for the first few pages. It does get better until about 3/4 of the way through, when I think there's a revelation relating to Seth's brother, which has kind of been an ongoing mystery throughout the book, which has been hinted at but never revealed. And I think the ultimate reveal was very rushed and it didn't really fit with me. It kind of was clunky and it jarred me from the novel because it didn't fit with what had gone before it. I would also say that of the very end of this book. It's a cliffhanger, which is fine. I don't mind cliffhangers. I don't mind books that make you make up your own mind. However, this cliffhanger was, again, not in keeping with the rest of the book. I think Seth made a rash decision that didn't really have any real explanation. I think Patrick Ness just kind of, it very much reads like Patrick Ness got to a point where he was like, I don't know what's going to happen here, so let's just do that. But it really showed, I think. So this book, it could have done with a lot more attention. However, I think as it stands, it looks at some really important aspects and it brings some diversity that I haven't seen elsewhere in YA fiction. So I would recommend it. I wouldn't say it's the most amazing thing I've read, but it was good. Then I finished the month with After Leaving Mr. Mackenzie by Rhys. I'm not going to say much about this because actually I don't know how I feel about this book and it's really conflicting me, and I'm trying to look around for other reviews. I've been on Goodreads, I've been on YouTube, and I can't find a review that satisfies me in a way that I can say that I liked this book. I don't think I liked this book. Does that mean I'm not going to try Jean Rhys again? Probably not. I think I will try her again because there are things in here in terms of the writing that I liked. But overall, I didn't enjoy this. So this follows a woman called Julia. And basically, we meet her after a breakup, effectively. And basically, this is just a character study of her. She goes around and she doesn't have much, so she relies on the kindness of rich men to basically sustain her lifestyle. We follow her as she goes back home to London and tries to sort of integrate herself back into her family unit. We follow her through the death of her mother and things like this. Ultimately, I just didn't like this. I think I liked it in terms of that it had this melodrama to it that I really enjoy in my fiction. I don't know why, but I kind of enjoy melodramatic statements. So Julia always reads as somebody on the brink of suicide. It almost had a kind of Anna Karenina-esque drama about it. It also reminded me a lot of Breakfast at Tiffany's, but ultimately what I didn't like about this book was that I didn't understand what it was trying to say. I'm sure it's some clever metaphor or something. To me, it just read as though Julia was kind of this cardboard cutout of a woman, I suppose, and I think that's probably intentional. I think, you know, Jean Rhys was writing in the 30s, so obviously women were portrayed as these kind of hysterical creatures, but ultimately, if that was intentional and if it was kind of to poke fun at the way that men treat women, then I needed more, because as it was, I couldn't decide whether that was the case or whether Jean Rhys was just creating this cardboard cutout character who didn't really have any depth to her. And I felt like that was ultimately this whole novel. It didn't have any depth to it. It didn't go under the surface. It was kind of all these characters who weren't really developed and didn't really make sense, and the whole book to me just didn't really make sense. And as I say, I was sure that that was probably me missing something really intelligent in this book, but none of the reviews I've read have satisfied me. The only one that sort of made it make sense is that one person was saying that they think that this is very autobiographical on Jean Rhys's part. I don't know how true that is, however it would make sense to me because this also kind of reminded me of the way I felt about The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, in that the characters in that novel for me just weren't developed enough, because I think when you write yourself to that extent you don't remember to characterise yourself because you know yourself, and I think that's definitely a problem for me in The Bell Jar. And it would make sense if that was the problem for me in this novel. I needed more characterisation, I needed to understand the motivations of the characters more. I just needed more. I needed to understand what Jean Rhys was saying a little bit more. As I say, that may be completely me, but I kind of don't think it is. I kind of just, it's a really short novel, and it also has very wide margins, so I literally read it in 2 sittings. I think it took me like 2 hours, so it's not really a surprise that it kind of feels like it just skims the surface without ever getting underneath to the actual issue. I don't know, it just didn't sit with me really. I just couldn't. As I say, the writing was good, don't get me wrong, there were some fantastic sentences. For instance, there's a section, this is where I'm not going to be able to find it, there's a section basically where Julia wakes up, here it is, and it says, every day is a new day, every day you are a new person, and Julia sort of reminds herself of that, and I like that stuff, and I really like the melodrama in a way, but as I say, I just needed more, so we'll see. As I say, I will be trying more Jean Rhys. Please, if I've missed something really fundamental in that novel, let me know down below, because I'd quite like to know. But anyway, so that's what I've been reading for the second half of August. Please let me know down below what you've been reading, and I will see you next time. Bye!